What is up, guys? It is Space Monk. I'm here to continue with the Phoenix Operator Owner Manual, Phoenix Journal number 27. It is important to remember that ignorance of the truth is acceptable for a time. But remember, God within you will give you many opportunities to turn your ignorance into the wisdom of the knowledge of truth. And if you are truly a servant to the one all that is, you will always welcome the light of truth to shine within and before you, even if you find the truth to be abhorrent within your very being. This means that you cannot hide behind the blind ignorance which rules you by fear and denial of responsibility. This is not acceptable ignorance in God's kingdom, because you thereby become the servant of the Antichrist and have therefore given your life into the hands of evil. Here is an example of unacceptable ignorance. This false belief applies to many who consider themselves a part of the so-called New Age movement. Ones are given the wisdom of truth that says, yes, you are God, and so you create your own reality. Many ones have falsely interpreted that to mean, I can now ignore the reality I've already contributed to the creation of, and it will no longer be my responsibility because I am God. This is a prime example of how the Antichrist will twist and alter the truth and maintain his playground of deception. Just because you choose to ignore the disease and corruption within your government, for example, that does not mean you are now exempt from the responsibility. What do you think happens to all the energy of all the thoughts, words, deeds, and actions you had before you became, in your perception, a master of the positive manifestation? Do you perhaps think that, poof, God just evaporates it for you and you are no longer responsible? Or do you think to yourself, well, this government corruption and war and economic crisis and responsible and possible food shortage is all just doom and gloom ugliness that others choose to acknowledge, and it's not my fault. So as long as don't bring it, doom and gloom, within my reality, it's not true and it doesn't exist for me. We have news for you ones. If you believe that nonsense, you've become a tool of apathy for the Antichrist possessing you. All are connected to the pool of mass consciousness of manifested illusion on this plane. If you choose to only selectively accept the truth which is comfortable for you and doesn't upset your illusion of reality, then you have also denied the highest command of the law of the creation, achieved the wisdom of knowledge, inasmuch as this will enable you to wisely follow the laws of the creation. 5. Remember God's day and keep it holy. Now, within the so-called Christian Bible, this law has been interpreted as a day, and the day that was chosen by humans was the one called Sunday, and also called the Sabbath. This was the day which humans said that no work could be done, and that you must go to their church and pray, repent, and give thanks because this was God's day. We must tell you this is not correct, because all days in the kingdom of God and the creation are His. This means you must keep all of your days holy in reverence to the divine, holy, one presence of God within all of the creation. Every day. Every day you must, as part of your prayer, acknowledge and give thanks and honor to God and the creation for all the blessings of abundance, wisdom, and life which the Father within you has bestowed upon you. Remember this about the true purpose and power of prayer and meditation. Prayer is asking for guidance from the Father within for what you need to know in order to sustain in His service. And in all things, Father, not my will, but thine will be done. Meditation, then, is receiving that information from the Father within to sustain in His service. Eventually, you will all be in a constant state of meditation and communion, mutual participation or sharing with the Divine Father within. Now, Sunday has also been called God's day of rest. This is not logical. What about the farmer who has animals and his fields to tend? This is not to say you cannot rest, but your rest may be on a Monday or a Wednesday, or maybe just an hour or two each day. It will be different for every human depending on the conditions of his service to God. When the cycle of time comes, when all is returned to the one of the creation, there is a period of what might be termed as rest. This means that life as you know it in this illusion will cease to exist. It is one of the great mysteries which measures and cycles the ebb and flow of the one divine source of all that is. Until that time, God within you will guide you as to when the necessary time of rest are for you. Times of rest. 6. You shall honor your mother and father. This wondrous law has most often been taken only in the quite literal sense. And it is true, you must honor the ones who are the vehicles for your soul being sent here by the grace of God. The same as you would honor all beings of... Hold on, technical difficulties. The same as you would honor all the beings of life created by our Creator God and the creation. This means that as a babe and child, you are dependent upon your parents or others to sustain you physically in the very least. There is also the tremendous responsibility that those who choose to be parents, defined as a father or mother, or any organism that generates another, a source or cause, have. They are also choosing to be teacher and guardian for you, one of God's creations. They are also entrusted by God, our Creator, whether they know it or not, the responsibility of giving you the tools to become self-sufficient and sustain in holy God's service for the remainder of this lifetime. This is why in the more spiritually aware kingdoms of God, all beings are not given the responsibility for the procreation of the species. Firstly, it is an honor that is earned by the parents who completely understand their responsibility to teach the laws of balance of God in the creation. Secondly, procreation of the species is taken very seriously by your more spiritually advanced brothers on their planetary systems. See law number 15. The reason is that they recognize and honor the truth of the laws of God in the creation. You see, they have learned that the spiritually weak will pass on their disease, apathy, ignorance, and misunderstanding to their progeny, thus spreading the insidious cancer and destruction of the Antichrist throughout their species. They know that these children of God are their promise for the balanced continuation of their species. So it goes that the procreation responsibilities are monitored very carefully to maintain balance of the species within the laws of God and the creation. Every child is loved and carefully tended and instructed by all who have earned this, one of the most important responsibilities of any human, that of being a parent for God. Now, the other purpose for and meaning of this law is that you shall honor the mother and father principle of all that is in the creation. A very wondrous example is that you must honor this beloved planet Terra, who represents mother principle, in that she nurtures and sustains the lives of all creatures of God who exist here. And you must honor our Father, God, who gives forth the seed of the Spirit of all life within the oneness of all that is. Of course, God is the mother-father principle in harmony, balance, and motion. So there exists the mother-father unity and balance in all fragments of the divine creation. 7. You shall not murder your fellow man. In the Bible of the so-called Christians, this law is written simply as thou shalt not kill, which leaves room for misunderstanding of interpretation. What this law means is you shall not wish death upon another human being of God in your thoughts, as well as you shall not commit physical murder of another human being. This rule does not mean you cannot defend yourself and your family if your lives are threatened, because that is suicide, which is self-murder. and so is also against God's laws. You must not ever choose suicide of your body because you feel worthless and can't go on, because you dishonor the life force of God within you. Only God within you must decide the end of a physical life stream. That time will only come when your purpose and mission is accomplished, so that the process and divine plan of God for your spiritual growth will not be interrupted. The remorse of the soul is oftentimes much greater after the suicide of the body is accomplished than the perceived altered ego illusion of suffering before the life stream is terminated. Just remember that when you honor God within yourself and all that is, you truly understand the law's balance given by our divine Holy One. You would never consider the self punishment of suicide. You will simply cherish every living breath you take in the gift of life and God and the creation. Oh, yes. And for those of you who label themselves feminists and pro choice, which usually means pro murder of one of God's children, remember this: there are no accidental pregnancies. If you become pregnant, which is being the vehicle for one of God's new creations, choosing an abortion because of your selfish and irresponsible sexual behavior is still murder, any way you look at it. Remember, you each are given, along with your free will, personal responsibility for all your thoughts, words, deeds, and actions. There are definitely many possible understandable effects to illicit and wanton, lustful sexual activity. Pregnancy and disease are two obvious results which do and have occurred more often than not. Now, if a woman is forcefully and violently raped against her will and becomes pregnant, then she must commune with the God within her as to whether or not he will terminate the pregnancy. So it will not be her altered ego choice or will, but the Father's will within her will be done. This is usually what a miscarriage is, the Father's will, and no one else will make the decision for her, only the Father within her. 8. You must not commit adultery. The literal definition of adultery in your dictionary is the voluntary sexual intercourse of a married person with someone not the spouse. Now, the reason for this law, which still applies now, was that well before and at the time that the commandments were presented by Moses to the people, they were mostly simple-minded, ignorant, illiterate, and God-fearing because of their previous false teachings given by the religious empire leaders of their time. The problem was that throughout your past history, many young men and soldiers would lustfully spread their fertile seed in the sexual act to many various young, willing women whom they met within their daily lives and in their travels from village to village. Times have not changed much, have they? The obvious result was that many women became pregnant, and usually by that time the man was long gone to war or to the next village, so she would be left alone with the responsibility of birthing and raising her child. Many women could not handle this unexpected responsibility and the desertion of who they usually thought to be their man. Many women, overcome by the horror, shame, and guilt of their circumstance, killed themselves and their unborn by trying to abort the child. Many women were left on the streets unless they had friends or family who would take care of them, and many women abandoned their birthed child, sometimes at the doorstep of a church or orphanage. but also some would leave the child to die in some dark and desolate place. So thus the necessity of this law: you must not commit adultery. See law number 15, you must obey the wisdom of God for the responsibility you have of balanced procreation of your species. So, in his loving mercy and infinite wisdom, God created the commitment of marriage or wedlock, defined in your dictionary as a legal contract by a man and a woman to live together as husband and wife. In the higher realms, it is a very serious and joyful commitment and is called divine union. In this way, he planted the seed of joint responsibility of this husband and wife to each other and to any offspring they produced. This is why marriage is to be considered one of the most serious and sacred commitments to God. Now, we will quote some of the actual teachings given on the subject of the Father's Word given by the Master Teacher Jesus, Isu Emmanuel, from the book now in print as part of the Phoenix Journal series entitled, "And They Called His Name Emmanuel, I Am Sananda." Nearly 2,000 years ago, when the Master Jesus, Isu Emmanuel, was asked about the commitment of marriage and the rights of men and women, this is what he said. All good things were given unto you, and you received the laws according to which you are to live. You should adhere you should adhere to these and additional laws, so that you shall prosper on earth and have peace in your families. Remove the power of the old law that women shall be subject to man, since she is a person equal to man in spirit respect and has equal rights and obligations. There are many distortions in the laws since they were given forth by God and the celestial sons, for men have built them to be suitable unto themselves. When a man marries a woman, he shall pay to the most trusted steward of the handling of her possessions, as a price of security, lest she suffer from lack of her necessities. The price should be calculated in such a way that for each year of her life, 100 pieces of silver should be the basis, measured according to her knowledge, her ability, and her strength, provided that her health is not lacking. The price is not to be considered as that of a purchase, for no person may be sold or bought, but as security for the woman lest she suffer lack. Amount and type of financial security for modern times will be adjusted accordingly. For further clarification of Emmanuel's statements, read Phoenix Journal Express Volume 1 and 2, pages 34 and 40. The bond of matrimony between man and woman should be permitted only if both are of mental competence and capable of leading a marriage in accordance with the law. Note, that is God's law. If according to predetermined agreement no price is paid, the law applies. The man must supply the needs of the wife regarding all of her necessities. The inability of a wife to bear children or a man's inability to sire children is no reason for divorce, nor does she or he deserve other opinions or actions. The only reason for divorce is that of adultery. That is the destruction or endangering of spirit, the body, or the life of the members of one's own family unit. If a person is divorced by his own actions of adultery, he should be sterilized, for he is unworthy of life and its laws, for he has responded to the selfish, lustful drives of pleasure seeking and has cast aside all responsible behavior. End of quoting. Now, in the literal translation, in order for adultery to occur, then one or the other or both of the two adulterers would then have to have made the vow of marriage. In God's kingdom of truth, this vow of divine union made between two, a man and a woman, to live together as one, is taken most seriously indeed, because it is a commitment made to the Father within, each to the other, for that entire life stream. It is a contract with God rather than a legal contract of the human experience. This means that a man and a woman who cohabit together as lovers without a so-called legal contract must make the same commitment to God as those who have the so-called legal contract, whether they realize it or not. It is not necessarily always a contract made to God to procreate the species, because many who choose divine union may not choose, be able, or be qualified to fulfill that procreation service to the one Father. Reread commandment number 6, where we discuss the responsibility of procreation. But both lovers still have the same responsibility as a legally married couple for the offspring they may produce. If they only choose cohabitation because of sexual lust or other selfish reasons, they have thus denied their responsibility to God, and they will suffer the consequences of their actions at the hands of evil. See law number 13. As you sow, so shall you reap. Also known as the law of cause and effect. Does this mean that divorce, defined as dissolution of marriage bond by legal process or accepted custom, any radical or complete separation goes against law? Any radical or complete separation goes against the laws of God and the creation? Yes and no. You see, it depends on the true circumstances experienced by the divorcing couple. For example, since your commitment in life is always first in service to God, then ideally your chosen partner in marriage must support your commitment as well as his or her commitment to the Holy Father. If, for example, your partner batters you and or your children physically or emotionally and thus does not support or honor either his or your commitment in service to God, then you are no longer bound by your contract bond of marriage. Why would God bind you and your children to a commitment of suffering and punishment? It is not logical. But if your partner decides that she wants to divorce you because you are just no longer attractive to him or her physically and sexually, this is not an acceptable reason for divorce. Excuse me. Let's take that example further. Say your partner is no longer attracted to you and decides to find sexual satisfaction elsewhere. She has committed adultery. Reread above quote by Jesus Emmanuel. And if you choose to do so, it is an acceptable reason for divorce. The reason is that not only has your partner broken his or her commitment with you and himself, but in the act of adultery, he has broken his commitment to serve God. Because by the act of fulfilling his lust, he has invited the Antichrist within his temple. Of course, the choice you make about whether or not to divorce an adulterous mate will ultimately be made by the Father within you. 9. You must not steal materially or emotionally. This law does not mean literally that you must not steal, defined as 1. To take another's property, etc., dishonestly, especially in a secret manner. 2. To take slyly as a look. 3. To gain insidiously or artfully as he stole her heart. And this law also means you must not steal the trust and good faith of another by lying to them about your true motives and intent. You see, malicious lying and stealing are opposite sides of the same coin. Here are some examples of various forms of lying and stealing. If a man falsely tells a woman who is a virgin that he loves her and wants to marry her, but all he really wants from her is a sexual encounter, he is misleading her. If she in good faith falls in love with him and also falls for the trap of his false promise to her and succumbs to his pressure to express their love physically before the marriage vow is made, and then he abandons her, he has essentially stolen her heart, her innocence, and her chastity for his own lustful, selfish intent. Even if the woman wisely refuses his sexual advances and finds herself rejected by him, he is still guilty of lying to her, which is stealing from her emotionally. The big difference in these two scenarios is that although she has been robbed emotionally, at least she doesn't have the guilt of dishonoring herself by breaking the laws of God and giving away her chastity to an unworthy man. Here's another example of stealing the innocence of another. Innocence defined as 1. Free from sin, evil, not guilty of a specific crime. 2. Harmless. 3. Knowing no evil. 4. Without guile or cunning. 5. An innocent person as a child. Now, stealing in itself is a sin against God's laws upon only the one who steals. But when one succeeds in stealing the innocence of another, what he has essentially done is willfully and blatantly lied to them. So thus, he has enticed and manipulated the other to also break the laws of God and the creation. So in order for innocence to be stolen from another, the person stealing must be doing so knowingly and blatantly with the intent of manipulating another to fulfill his own selfish means, and the victim has to guilelessly trust the person. For example, the leader of a country sends a young man off to a war which involves murder in a faraway place and tells them, "You are fighting for freedom and defending your country," and they believe this lie. So they go into the war and realize in horror that they're slaughtering innocent people and protecting and defending wealthy sheiks in their oil fields and money, not defending their country's freedom. That is when their innocence has been stolen from them, when they realize that they have been lied to and used by the ones they trusted to perpetuate evil. Another example, say you are a child and you discover that your father has a girlfriend on the side. This is adultery, friends. When you face him with this, he tells you that you face him with this, he tells you, hold on a moment. Face him with this, he tells you that you must promise him you will not tell your mother. He still loves her and doesn't want to hurt her and the family, etc. If you tell her, she will divorce him and. Well, as a child, you're devastated in your heart because your father has asked you to lie, but you promised him, and so somehow it would be your fault if you told your mother, and certainly wouldn't want to cause your parents to divorce. This is emotional blackmail, and the father has stolen the innocence of his own child by making her promise to lie and making her feel responsible for his irresponsible behavior, for what could happen if she told her mother the truth. Another perhaps more repugnant example, any adult man or woman who willfully indulges in the lustful coercion and manipulation of a child who trusts him or her to perform any form of sexual activities has most definitely stolen the innocence of that poor child. Here's another example close to the hearts of Americans. Your forefathers of the wondrous United States of America were inspired by God in the development of a most sacred Constitution and Bill of Rights in order to maintain peace and balance and allow you freedom and the pursuit of happiness. Although not perfect, with the addition of certain amendments abolishing slavery, for example, it became the most important and protective set of standards for human rights, decency, and freedom in your current history on earth. Now, every person you elect into the offices of leadership, such as the presidency, vice presidency, Congress, and Senate, has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. You, the people, have elected those leaders on the trust and good faith that they will honor your Constitution and Bill of Rights. You now have a president and a Congress who mostly support him, who has essentially, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s. Okay. Let's see. You now have a president and Congress who mostly support him, who has essentially nullified this U.S. Constitution by his executive orders in order to pursue the one world order, which has a new so-called constitution for one world domination. This is called stealing your freedom, America, and making you slaves. Are those so-called elected leaders who support this infringement on your U.S. Constitution honoring the oath they gave you and to God? They are stealing your freedom, and worse than that, they are taking an oath that they know they won't honor. That is called lying to you, the people, for their own selfish means. Please do not confuse the ones who act by willful guile and deceit in stealing the innocence or possessions of others with the ones who truly believe a lie to be the truth and then pass on their false belief to others. For example, their children or students. This is an example of ignorance of truth, and although it may or may not be acceptable to God, ignorance is not a willful act of stealing the innocence of another. Here is something else that is very important to remember and understand clearly. If one tells what he knows to be a lie in a true self-defense, privacy, or for the defense, privacy, and protection of another, this is not against God's laws. This does not mean lying to maliciously deceive about evil secret oaths or activities such as the evil cult of Freemasonry. This is one way the Antichrist twists God's laws to condemn others by once telling you must never lie, which means, one, to make a statement which one knows to be false, two, that which is intended to produce a false impression. You can literally be made the tool for harm or destruction of yourself or another. Let us give you some examples to think about. Let's say it is World War II, and in compassion you are hiding a Japanese American family in your basement to protect them from being in the camps. So the police come to your door and ask you if you have seen or know any Japanese people. Are you going to tell them the truth, knowing it'll endanger your family as well as the ones you're protecting? Next example. Let's say you go to war and are captured by the enemy. They require you to appear on the television and make a statement to your leaders which you know is false, but if you do not, they will kill you. Are you going to do what they say? Here is an example given several times by Aten. Let's say our beloved Jesus Christ Sananda comes to your home and the authorities come looking for him, and you know it's because his persecutors do not want him free and alive. Are you going to tell them where he is? We will give one more example which may become reality for many. Let's say your government institutes a draft requirement. Well, your son, father, or friend refuses to sign up for the draft and decides to become a conscientious objector. Now, if the authorities call you and ask you where this person is, will you tell them? Now, when it gets a little sticky with God is when, for example, you witness a murder. You know the murderer, and because of your fear of being a witness and perhaps threatened yourself, you lie to the police and tell them you saw nothing. Think carefully about this because there are crimes committed daily against God's laws of balance, of which there are witnesses who are too afraid to tell the police. The criminal remains free to continue his crimes against God. Remember, you must understand the difference. We are not talking about witnessing the breaking of man-made laws, which may or may not be just and change continually with the times. We're talking about the breaking of God's laws, which do not change and are eternally the laws of balance within the creation. You ones also have something called little white lie, defined as a false statement made with the intent of being polite or kind. This is also called the social lie. Now, most of you ones do choose to politely lie to retain your privacy. This is one way, but there are ways to not lie and retain your privacy as well. For example, if someone asks you how much money you make or what you do with your time, you have several ways to respond. You can lie, or the considered direct but harsh response is, that is none of your business. But for those of you who wish to honor yourself and be polite to the other, you can say simply, please do not be offended. But I prefer not to answer that question as it does not concern you. There are situations which do fit the criterion of the white or polite lie, although many of you ones do try to stretch the limits of those criterion. The key here is intent. Oftentimes, rather than honoring your true feelings, you will hide behind the white lie in order to keep your job, for instance, if you perceive your employer to be narrow-minded and tyrannical, and you are afraid that by being honest and direct with your ideas and feelings, you will be fired. You see, you will perpetuate the perceived tyranny against yourself by being polite and allowing it to continue. An example of a truly polite lie is this. When you know your mother spent hours preparing a meal for you, and you do not like the ham, and she asks you how you like her meal, and you say, it is excellent. Although it is not exactly a true statement, your true intent in kindness and appreciation is to honor what you know to be her feelings of love for you. So, if you lie and your intent is to manipulate another in order to selfishly achieve or receive something from them you desire, rather than acting with integrity and being direct, this is not a white lie. Remember this, you can lie to yourself or to another, but you cannot ever lie to God. You see, God always monitors and records your true intent in all situations He presents to you. 10. You must not covet or envy that which belongs to your neighbor. Let us first define the words covet and envy. Covet means to long for something belonging to another. Covetous means excessively desirous of something, greedy. Envy means 1. A feeling of resentment or discontent over another's superior attainments, endowments, or possessions. So the literal meaning of this law is that you must not, because of your own insecure, inferior feelings and lack of self-worth, long to have something another has, such as money, a new car, a skill, or a talent. And then on top of longing for this object another has, you must not then resent the person who has. You must not resent the person who has attained that which you feel you desire, but have not created, exactly because of your insecure, inferior feelings and lack of self-worth. See also recognizing the Antichrist within. What transpires when you become covetous and envious is that you become wrapped up in your greed and resentment, and you will not be taking personal responsibility for your manifested illusion. You will continue to create the perceived lack, and eventually you will be consumed by the effects of covetous and envious feelings, which most often result in the various manifestations of self-punishment, i.e., anger, guilt, criticism, jealousy, and depression. 11. You must not impose nor force your free will upon the free will of another, also known as the law of non-interference. This law was given forth by God so that the free will and soul evolution of each fragment would not be infringed upon without permission from God within, especially by the adversaries of God with more awareness of their power. This is each fragment's God-given protection so that there is justness in their individual process of God potential unfoldment toward the One. Also, it prevents even your benevolent brothers from interfering or assisting without permission from the Holy Father. You see, during each life stream of each fragment, there is present the opportunity and the potential for divine choice through the free will experiences of each fragment. The young souls begin to unfold their godness through the lessons they learned in each life stream experienced. In other words, they learn by experience to know God within them and what thoughts, words, and deeds keep them in the darkness and ignorance of what their true God potential is. Now, you may be asking yourself, what about the tremendous evil influence upon this planet? Why is it allowed by God? The reason is this. Even the Satans, or adversaries of God, were not only created creatures of God, but were also given free will. God is simply giving his adversary creations their opportunity to grow into their potential of godness and divine holy light. But because of their limitedness in behavior, meaning ego, selfish separation from the One, their reality or playground of experience was also limited by God. They are bound by their own choice to the lowest levels described as the first through third physically manifested experiences. Can't be right. I think they are bound by their own choice to the lowest levels described as the first through fifth physically manifested experiences. You see, the fallen ones have self-imposed limitations by their choice to be adversarial and separate from their creator. But they are always given opportunities to see the light of the truth in the oneness of all. The rules are strict, and the fallen ones know the rules to remain ego-separate from God, but remain in their game of manipulation and deception. For example, if you feel the whisperings of the Antichrist within you, you can demand in the name of the Holy Father God and or Jesus Christ Sananda that all dark fragments and energies leave your space immediately. They must go. But they can hang around the periphery of your energy field and wait for a weak spot in your protective shield. This is why the importance of asking God for his white light, shield of love, protection, guidance, power, wisdom, integrity, and courage. So you must ask the Father within you to please show you that which you need in order to serve his will. Hence the importance of not my will, Father, but in all things let thy will be done. This sincere invocation is what keeps you on your path of service to God, the creation, and out of the folly of ignorance and perceived separation where exists the dark brotherhood or antichrists. You may begin to see that many of you ones here now have experienced many, many thousands or even millions of life streams in these lower levels by your choice to be or remain ignorant of your own God potential and connection to the one all that is. Here is a wondrous description of this process of discovery by our beloved brother Germain. All dimensions of the creation exist simultaneously. You simply have only your conscious awareness in this, the third dimension. As you work and live in this dimensional experience, you, with the help of your spiritual teachers, are stretching your awareness to the fourth, fifth, and sometimes even higher dimensional levels. It is not a vertical stretch as you perceive things linearly. It is an expansive, all-encompassing stretch of awareness. Your awareness expands to the level of your understanding when you have learned a or some particular lessons. When you have owned the lesson, it frees your awareness just a bit more, stretching, moving, growing within the mind of the universal I am, the one all that is. Now, the reason that your benevolent brothers, the hosts of heaven, have been sent to assist you is that many of you have prayed to God for freedom from the bondage of your self-imposed ignorance. They are sent here to answer your asking God for his divine guidance and assistance. They are your brothers of higher awareness and service to light of God in the creation. You see, some of you have recognized the folly of the Antichrist within you and the influence that mass consciousness has allowed the Satans or adversaries to have over you and this beloved planet Earth. You are tired and frankly bothered with this illusion, with being the adversaries of Godness. You want your freedom. You want to claim or reclaim his holy lighted presence within you. It is time for graduation, friends, to higher levels of life. You will each now find or awaken to your divinity of oneness, or, and this is very important to understand, you will remain bound to these lower levels for perhaps another millennium before another opportunity is granted by the expanding awareness of the God Self within by the One. Remember, though, that the lighted hosts of God may assist you and give instructions in truth through the maze of lies and deception, but they cannot do it for you. You each must reclaim your own power of the Divine One within you. No one can do it for another. It is wise to pay close attention to your instructions for conscious immortality. You will either serve God or you will serve your altered ego self. It is up to you. 12. You must not judge others, but you must wisely judge all behavior and actions which are contrary to the laws of balance of God in the creation. And Emmanuel wisely told the people, "Judge not falsely, lest ye be judged falsely. For with whatever judgment you judge, so will you be judged, and with whatever measure you measure, so will you be measured. Therefore, judge according to the logic of the laws of nature, which are from the creation, for they alone are true and accurate. What do you see but the splinter in your brother's eye? And are you not aware of the sliver in thine own eye? You hypocrite! First, pull the sliver from out your own eye, and then see how you can pull the splinter out of your brother's eye. First, learn the laws of nature and of the creation, their logic, before you judge and want to see the mistakes of your fellow man. First, learn through the laws of nature and of the creation your own mistakes, so that you can correct the mistakes of your fellow man. You should never give sacred things unto the dogs, nor throw your pearls before the swine, lest they step on them with their feet, and turn on you, and tear you apart. For verily I say unto you, do not throw your spiritual treasures into the dirt, and do not waste them on those who are unworthy, for they do not thank you, and they will tear you apart. For their understanding is small, and their spirit is weak. End quote. And they called his name Emmanuel. Exactly as it is written, no one must ever judge another to be lesser or more than he, especially because the other one is of different color, race, creed, or sex, or planet than be you. But understand this carefully. You must wisely judge all the behaviors. Understand this carefully. You must judge all the behaviors and actions by anyone, including self, which you know are against life, meaning against or contrary to the laws of balance, which maintain the balance created by God within the creation. And so you must honor all of your brothers and sisters as equal fragments of the one, but you must not accept, tolerate, or allow behavior and actions to continue in your space which you know break the laws of balance. But you must not think harshly of another and call him stupid or not worthy because he is different in personality and behavior than you are and understand. Each is equal in reflection of God, only different. Celebrate and honor the unique differences of others. They, as are you, are expressing the Father within them in a unique and glorious way. Remember, God allows ignorance of the laws only to a point, and then he is pushed out of the temple of any of his fragments who continue with their blatant disregard and honor for life. 13. As ye sow, so shall ye reap, also called the law of cause and effect. Now, this is the law that most choose to ignore or misunderstand when they do not want to take personal responsibility for their manifested experience, perceived good and or especially bad. God created cause and effect so that each soul fragment would recognize that when he did a specific act, say stole a car from his brother, that there would be an effect to his transgression, such as perhaps going to jail. But the nature of the effect is produced in a way unique to each individual fragment, which will bring the greatest opportunity for the understanding of the lesson for that soul fragment. Unfortunately, for many, the repeat and repeat of similar same errors has continued over the course of some thousands of years. Yes, it is by choice that the soul would refuse to take personal responsibility for his thoughts, words, and deeds. The catch is, all are responsible for all which occurs within their manifested illusion. Whether or not one wisely chooses to finally recognize and accept this truth is entirely up to each. They will still suffer the consequences of their actions which are contrary to God's laws, and or they will also reap the divine benefits of understanding and obeying God's laws. Now, in your Eastern religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, they have the term called karma, defined in Funk and Wagnall's dictionary as, this is karma, defined as the spiritual force generated by one's action which determines one's reincarnated situation. 2. Loosely fate. 3. Vibration. Karma, even by this definition, does not accurately describe the same purpose or meaning of the simple cause and effect. The term karma, loosely believed by many, implies you must do this or that has occurred because it is your karma, implying that it is also your fate. One can fall in the rut of blaming all experiences on their karma and therefore not adequately learning the lesson to release this perceived karma. The definition of karma implies that yes, there are consequences to your actions, but that you are doomed to pay back lifetime after lifetime, and does not take into consideration the release of payback when the lesson is truly learned by the soul fragment. Remember this: at any instant when the true understanding and recognition has occurred regarding the error and effects of the one's actions, that one can, through self-forgiveness, release any repetition of a transgression against another, self, and God. For example, let's say that one known as Hitler, who was responsible for the deaths of millions, truly recognized and understood his transgressions against God in the moments before he made his death transition. All things are possible, friends. And in those moments before his death from this live stream, he prayed to the God within him for forgiveness of self and all others, and that he then put his will into God's will to be of service only unto the Father. Now, for ones who believe in karma, they would say that the soul energy that was Hitler would be doomed to the same persecution he committed on others, as well as at least 1,000,000 deaths at the hands of a tyrant such as was he. And if Hitler refused to see his folly, then undoubtedly his self-judgment before God would be severe. But depending on the level of his understanding or learning of the lessons, his payback could be that he becomes one who devotes his entire next incarnation, his payback, but depending on the level of his understanding or learning of the lessons, his payback could be that he becomes one who devotes his entire next reincarnation life streams to the service of God by helping his fellow brethren overcome their spiritual starvation. Do you think then that it is not possible that God would not welcome his servant back within his fold of truth, love, and light? One must never forget that even the victims of Hitler's hatred chose their victimhood. If ones choose not to become victims to anyone or any situations by always honoring God within themselves and all others, and thus living in balance with the laws of God and the creation, they would no longer create victimizers such as Hitler. It is really so simple. If they learned their lessons of how and why they created their victimhood, then they would also forgive themselves all who they perceived victimized them, so that they too could release and be free of the bondage of karma. And on top of forgiveness, their release may involve actually being ever thankful to the Father within for bringing the lessons to them and thus helping them recognize their self-transgressions and becoming now free from the bondage of victimhood. Do you see the picture now? The responsibility for all manifested experiences lies with all who share in and exist within the experience. 14. You must honor all commitments made in service to God, the Father, the one within. Now let us describe what commitments are made in service to God versus commitments of this manifested illusion. Your most important commitment in service to God is to wisely understand and obey the laws of God and the creation which are unfolding for you here. This is the excellent way for honoring self and God within all others in service to God and the creation. Simply understanding and obey the laws, simply understand and obey the laws of God and the creation. You ones have made this commitment difficult unto yourselves, and it needn't any longer be. Now you have the laws before you, and you need not longer claim ignorance or misunderstanding. Do you see? Claim your divine holy godness now. We are all one. The time is now before you to know and own the truth. Now let us discuss the other types of commitments made by first defining what commitment means in the Funk and Wagnall's dictionary. 1. The act of committing to devote oneself unreservedly, or the state of being committed. 2. An engagement or pledge to do something. Other commitments which are made in service to God include marriage, parenthood, feeding and tending the physically hungry, poor, and ill, and spreading the word of truth about the Spirit of God and the creation to all of your spiritually ignorant and starved brethren who will listen. Now, a commitment you make to buy a house or car on credit to be paid by future income is shaky at best for both parties agreeing to these terms. Credit, in this circumstance, is a promise to pay later at some designated future time. Many families are now finding, and many more will find, that they cannot honor this promise to pay because many have lost or will lose their jobs and thus do not have the income to pay. This is an example of a commitment which is not in service to God. Trillions of credit dollars have been made by few by the manipulation of credit, and so too has trillions been lost by the many who have become trapped in obligations they cannot pay for. There are thousands of examples of commitments made of this type. So if you make a promise or commitment to a fellow brother or sister to help them in some way, such as pay them for a service performed for you, or to feed their pets and take care of their home while they are away, then your word represents your integrity to honor, to the best of your ability, all promises made to the other. Your personal power is in direct relationship to the integrity of your soul. This means that if your word of promise or commitment means nothing, then you dishonor yourself, brethren, and God, and become powerless and thus a tool for evil. So the moral of the story is, think very carefully about any promises or commitments you make before you give your word. Do not give your word for some future promise unless you are certain you will be able to keep your word. And be certain you completely understand what any promise, oath, or commitment that is asked of you on this plane means before you give your word to it. Because if you are not careful, as in the case of many so-called secret organizations, societies, and mystery schools, your commitment to them may mean your inadvertent commitment to evil. A commitment made to evil or Satan is not a commitment made in service to God, and therefore is not recognized by God. When we come back, we'll go over law number 15. Thank you for listening.